And we'll get into our message. As you know, we've been working our way through Proverbs now for quite some time. And what we have in Proverbs is literally 31 chapters of wisdom that are designed by God. It's kind of His gift to us to help us navigate the complexities of life. And it's a very practical study. And we've covered a lot of ground already. We started by focusing in on how we can overcome temptation and why that's important. Then we learned to trust God with all of our heart. We then looked, and there's a lot of Proverbs that speaks to finances. And so we looked at finances on how to make money, and then once you've made it, how to manage it. We looked at the importance of guarding our heart. And just before Easter, the week before Easter, we focused on a lot of Proverbs that would guide us in how we should accept and respond to criticism and correction when it comes our way. And this morning we're going to focus in on communication because it, again, is one of those areas that Solomon and the book of Proverbs touches on over and over again. And when it comes to communication, there's certain things we need to understand. First of all, we need to understand how powerful it is. When we know how to communicate, there are very few problems that you will ever face that cannot be resolved if you know how to communicate. On the other hand, it's powerful in the other direction. If you don't know how to communicate, that lack of communication, that failure in communication can be very, very destructive. I see it quite often. I've seen couples overcome, tremendous challenges because they could and they did communicate. And I've seen other couples. In fact, I've told you about some of them, probably at the top of the totem pole. And I know I've told you about them because it's just etched in my mind. They were ready to get a divorce over crumbs on the kitchen counter. Now think about it. Especially if you were ever married. If that was the biggest problem you had, we got crumbs on the kitchen counter, man, you'd be like, cloud nine, this is wonderful, heaven on earth, right? They were ready to get a divorce over crumbs on the kitchen counter. And it had nothing to do with crumbs. It had everything to do with the fact they did not know how to communicate. Communication is powerful. It's also complicated, and we struggle because we are imperfect people. And imperfect people, in the process of communication, it's really easy for me to misspeak. It's very easy for you to mishear and to misunderstand. In fact, I forget where I got this, one of my professors over the years. But he said, here's how complicated communication is. It starts in my mind. It starts in your mind. We have an idea that we want to express. And you know from experience, somewhere between here's what I want to say and here's what I actually say sometimes become two very different things, right? But that's only the beginning, because as soon as it leaves your mouth, it goes into the ear of someone, and so there's what they hear, which may or may not have something to do with your original thought, but then they go through the process of understanding. So I hear these words, and in my mind, this is what it means. And so now I draw a conclusion based on what I heard you say, and you're 4 or 5 steps removed from that original thought. And that's why it can be very, very complicated. Thankfully, Proverbs has an awful lot to say about communication, so much so that we're going to spend 2 weeks here because Communication is basically made up of two parts. There is an expression side. There I'm speaking. There I'm trying to communicate something that I'm thinking or something that I'm feeling or something that I want or some experience that I have. But there's a transfer of information from the person who is speaking, and then there's a reception side. That's the listening side. And here the focus is on hearing what they're saying, processing it, so that I understand what is being said, because you can't respond correctly until you've understood. And this morning we're going to focus on the listening side, because the simple reality is until we learn to listen, and listening is a skill, and it's a skill that we should work on. And I say it all the time. We live in a talk show culture. Now, I find talk shows annoying. In fact, I've told many people a good idea is they have this switch on our TVs or this button on our remote controls. It's called power, and you can push it and turn it off. Or you can push the channel and change the channel. And sometimes it's a really good idea because we have this talk show society, and it influences us. We're a talk show culture. You know what we're not? We're not a listening culture. And it's like, if you could just take a step back and observe and think about it, you'd realize, you know what? Here's why communication isn't happening. It's because nobody's listening. If everybody's talking but nobody's listening, there's a lot of expression, but there's absolutely zero communication. That's our culture. Everybody wants to tell you what they think. Nobody wants to listen and work at understanding and finding agreement. I think one of the simplest verses in the Bible, but also one of the more profound, Amos 3:3, because it explains a lot. How can two people walk together except they be agreed? That's the King James. That's where I remembered it. It's a real simple premise. If you want to go north and I want to go south, can we go together? Nope. If we find agreement, can we go together? Absolutely. How do you find that agreement? Communication. And communication is made up of two parts: expressing and listening. And we're going to focus on the listening, because without listening, there is no communication and we will not find agreement. So, to get started, we begin with a real simple premise. The wise have learned to listen. We'll look at some Proverbs. Let the wise listen and add to their learning. Let the discerning get guidance. The heart of the righteous weighs its answers. What does it mean? He weighs its answers. He's heard something. He processes it. He finds in his mind, this is what I think that person is trying to say, so that now I know how to respond. He weighs his answers. The mouth of the wicked gush evil. He who answers before listening, that is his folly and his shame. Communication is a process. We exchange information, but we cannot respond accurately or appropriately until we first understood, and the way we get to understanding is listening. Then the process can continue. And so we're going to focus on listening. We start with a definition. Listening is the act of paying close attention to hear what is being communicated with the goal of understanding what is being expressed. And doesn't that seem so simple? And it would be really great if it was simple, but again, we're imperfect people, and when you're an imperfect person and an imperfect person is talking to another imperfect person in an imperfect world, it's a lot more complicated than what it seems. You have to deal with things like distractions. You have to deal with what I would call confusing messages. If you break communication down, there's a number of different parts on the expression side. Tone of voice is probably the most important. I tell people all the time, if you have a dog, you can test my theory. You can tell him how much you love him in like a really mean, gruff voice. And he'll get down in, the doggy, I'm sorry posture, and he'll look up you out of the corner of the eye, waiting for your whole demeanor to change. Or in a really nice, loving voice, you can say, come on, Rover, we're gonna go out in the backyard and I'm gonna shoot you in the head. And he'll wag his tail and he'll do a doggy smile because he thinks you're going to give him a treat because he's such a good dog. He can't understand you. He's a dog. I'm sorry. I know your dog is special and can understand you. I'm talking about other people's dogs, not yours. Right? But tone of voice, probably the biggest contributor, but there's a bunch of nonverbals. There's gestures, there's facial expressions, there's body language. Our emotions play a part. The words that we actually choose play a part. And sometimes all of those things are not in alignment. And so I'm trying to listen to Glenn, and his tone is telling me one thing, but his body language is telling me something else, and he's chosen words that, like, well, what in the world does he mean by that? Because I can't decipher it all. It's confusing, it's conflicting. Then there's something we all tend to share, a lack of patience. Because listening requires patience. There's a kind of a built-in assumption in us that we assume, oh, I know where that person's going. I know what they're going to say. And so we can short-circuit the process by interrupting them. They haven't even concluded their expression and we're already responding. Or we don't interrupt, but we do stop listening because now I'm thinking about what I'm going to say as soon as you shut up. That's a lack of patience. Short circuits the process. But good listening skills can overcome those challenges so we can get to where the idea in my mind and what you conclude having heard what I said are one and the same thing. Now we're communicating. Now we're having a conversation. So there is a purpose to listening. Listening is focused on understanding. I'm trying to understand because I know I cannot respond properly to what you're saying till I first understood it. And so to get there, there's some goals that we have to accomplish. First of all, we're going to have to factor in the emotions of the moment because emotions affect both people that are a part of this process of communication. My emotions are going to influence how I am speaking to you. Your emotions are going to affect your ability to listen. And I say it quite often, emotions are very real and they're very great exaggerators. They magnify everything. And so in the process of communication, it's very easy for me to over-express the enormity, the magnitude of whatever we're talking about. It's easy for you to overreact or underreact depending on the emotion. And so that has to get factored in because, again, we're trying to get to understanding. And if you're talking about something as if it's a Chicken Little event and the world is going to end if we don't do something right now, and I'm treating it as I can't find a toothpick and I've got something between my teeth that I really need to get out. Can we agree they're very two different problems as far as if we put them on a scale of 1 to 10, one's a 1 and one's a 10. And we need to get to understanding, and emotions can get in the way of getting to understanding. So that has to be factored in. And then, as I was just talking about a second ago, what is my tone saying to you? What am I reading in the tone? What about all the body language, all the nonverbals? That all has to get factored in. And because we're imperfect beings, it's very easy to misunderstand or misinterpret what the person is saying or how they are saying it. And so number 3 on that list there is a really good habit to get into, depending on, how serious it is, the level of the conversation. But ask a clarifying question. Is this what you're trying to say? Or what do you mean by this? And give them a chance to kind of give a little bit more insight into what they're trying to communicate. Or when they're done, say, can I kind of share, this is what I think I'm hearing. Is that what you're trying to say? And you give them a chance to hear what you're hearing, to understand what you're understanding. Because if we've got agreement there, okay, now the conversation can continue, but if what I'm hearing and what you're trying to say are two very different things, by asking a clarifying question or giving them a summary feedback to what you're hearing, that can, oh man, no, that's not what I'm trying to say, and you can fix the problem. Lastly, one last thing here. We need to avoid distraction. There are things where we need to talk, and we're all guilty of this. Diane, don't try to have a conversation when the Masters is on. Because I will say I'm listening, but I won't be listening. I'm watching the Masters. And the Masters is important, by the way. You should understand that. Right up there with the Super Bowl. I'm repeating myself. But sometimes you need to turn off the TV. You need to put the book down. You need to pause whatever it is you're doing because you cannot listen. Because listening is more than hearing words or noise. It's a comprehensive kind of thing where because some of the communication is in nonverbal ways. Okay, I need my eyes to listen. And if they're buried in a book or buried on or watching the TV, guess what? I'm not listening. At least I'm not fully listening. So I need to avoid distraction. I need to avoid defensiveness. Because I might be hearing things that I really don't want to hear. I might be interpreting them. You have a lot of experiences in counseling, and it's funny, you pick up on patterns, and one of the patterns that I see often is our ability to personalize things. And what I mean by that is someone's expressing some feeling they have, some problem that they're experiencing, and the other person assumes they're being accused of something or blamed for something or they're being attacked in some way. And so they get very defensive. And because I don't feel I'm being attacked because it's, between them and I'm just the innocent bystander, it's like, hey, time out here. Why do you think that they were, well, they said this. They said, well, I heard them say the same thing, and I didn't think I was being accused of something. And maybe that person has a guilty conscience. I don't know why we do that. I just know that we do that. We need to avoid defensiveness because they just might not be trying to blame you. Here's the thought I have in my mind there. The purposes of a man's heart are like deep waters, but a man of understanding draws them out. Remember, communication starts with an idea in my mind, something I want to say. And we need to get all the way over here where what I'm trying to say and what you understand that I have said is one and the same. And Solomon is framing that as, that's like a really deep well. But a man of understanding, a man who is patient, a man who has learned to listen, they can get there. They don't get tangled up in all of this. They can get there. They can draw that understanding out. So that's what we're trying to achieve. The question is, how in the world do we get there? Well, we started with a simple premise. Wise people have learned to listen. Second premise, the wise have mastered certain listening skills. And we're going to look at a couple Proverbs. But as we're looking at them, I want you to notice all the action words that the scriptures use that all describe the idea of listening. My son, if you accept, if you store up, if you turn your ear to wisdom, if you apply your heart, that every one of those phrases is addressing the idea of listening. Listen, my son, to a father's instruction. Pay attention and gain understanding. My son, pay attention to what I say. Listen closely to my words. And so what Solomon is saying is there are things that we can do to improve and get better as far as listening is concerned. And I want to kind of flesh some of these out in the rest of our time together. The first one is we need to learn to pay attention. And there's a positive and a negative here. My son, pay attention to my wisdom. Listen well to my words of insight. Now then, my son, listen to me. Pay attention to what I say. On a positive side, I need to be alert. I need to be focused. Some of the classics is you get woken up and your mate wants to talk to you about something really important and you haven't even had a cup of coffee yet. You know what? If that's me, I am not alert. I am not focused. I want coffee. Now give me coffee and then we can have a conversation. But until we have coffee, you can talk all you want. I need coffee. And then we can have the conversation. You see what I'm saying? Or another one. And this is kind of stereotypical, so I'll modify it slightly, because it used to always be poised as the husband walks in, the wife has been home caring for 2 and 3-year-olds all day long, and as soon as he walks in the door, she starts sharing all the problems that she wants him to address, and he's still in unwinding mode, and we live in a different world to when a lot of those books were being written. So sometimes it's the wife that's walking in and she hasn't had time to decompress and unwind from her day, and we're dumping on her all this stuff that needs to be done. On the positive side, there needs to be focus. There needs to be alertness. I need to be able to observe. That's what paying attention means. I need to concentrate on the actual words that you're using and try to understand the emotions of the moment. So there's a positive side. There's a negative side. Don't let your mind wander. Because if your mind has wandered off, you may look like you're listening, but you really aren't. Don't have a closed mind. And it's really easy. As soon as you think, oh, they're going over here and I don't want to talk about over here, and you just kind of shut down, you're no longer listening, so don't have a closed mind. And do avoid distraction. You cannot pay attention to multiple things at the same time. And so you push pause. Now, I understand that there are things in our lives. I had one a couple weeks ago. I was doing my taxes. And I'm like halfway through doing my taxes and the phone rang. And it's like, oh. And it was like someone wanted me to pay attention immediately. And it's like, hey, I'm right in the middle of something. Can you give me like a half an hour or an hour and I'll get there? Because I didn't want to have to start over, and it wouldn't be starting over, but I'd have to like go through everything I've gotten to get to this point so I understand where I'm at in the process, and it's just complicated. Do you like doing your taxes? I don't. It is complicated. So anyway, it'd be really hard. Could I have done it? Yes. Did I want to? No. Because I knew what it would cost me to push pause. So sometimes you say to someone, hey, can you give me half an hour? Can you give me an hour? And then we can have that conversation. Or can we talk about this after dinner? Now, I would suggest, since we're on this subject, this requires a little bit of discernment. Pressing pause may be an inconvenience. Probably is an inconvenience because if you're in the middle of something, pressing pause is, it's an interruption. There are a lot of things in life where, you know what? Press pause. Because if you're unwilling to press pause, to some extent you're communicating, this is more important than what's on your mind. And that may be absolutely true, but it may not be the message you want to send. And so be discerning in how you respond. Either press pause and say, hey, can we talk about this, in a half an hour or so? Or press pause and talk about it immediately, or say, hey, can we talk about it a little bit later? Be discerning in making that choice. Another skill that we should develop, patience. Couple Proverbs. He who answers before listening, it is his folly and his shame. The heart of the discerning acquires knowledge. The ears of the wise seek it out. And I mentioned this earlier. Why do we assume we know where people are going and what they're trying to say better than they do? And we've all done it, where they've said, oh, I know what you're trying to say. And that's a statement that says, I know what you're trying to say better than you know what you're trying to say. And that is almost never true. I mean, it can be close, but unless you are a mind reader, and the last time I checked, none of us are really mind readers, you don't know what they're trying to say. That's why in this moment you should be listening so that you can understand what they're trying to say. But it's really easy for us to jump to conclusions. And usually that's because we lack patience, and it short circuits the process because it invariably leads to interruptions. And so I'm answering before I've listened. And what does Solomon say that is? That's foolish. And it's shameful because it short circuits the process. Or even if I don't interrupt, if I stop listening so I can formulate my response when you stop speaking, it's not an interruption, but it's the same thing because I've stopped listening. I've stopped working towards understanding. Or I may respond with a hasty, kind of glib response that really demonstrates I don't understand from your perspective. Do you ever have someone where you've brought something up and they immediately apologize? And they don't even understand what they're apologizing for. They just immediately apologized, and their apology wasn't really an apology as much as it was, I don't want to talk about this, and so if I apologize, the subject is concluded, that chapter is closed, and we can move on. And forgiveness is really a much more in-depth process. Do you remember some of the stories and parables that Jesus told that focused on forgiveness? Books would be opened, and the amount of a debt that was owed would be determined. That shows you the kind of thing. And so if Andy brings something up that I've hurt him in some way, and I'm so sorry, Andy, please forgive me. I'm probably minimizing what I did to Andy because I just want to move on. I want to sweep the dirt under the rug and keep moving. And just by virtue of the fact that he's bringing it up and willing to talk to me about it shows how hurt he was. And I should let him express that so that when I ask for forgiveness, he understands that I understand how much I've hurt him. And that quick apology so that we can just sweep the dirt under the rug and move on, that's problematic. We need to listen, and that requires patience. And the more complex and difficult the subject matter is, the more we need to give the individual time and space to express themselves. Another skill we should learn, I'll call it control. The way of a fool seems right to him, but a wise man listens to advice. A man's wisdom gives him patience. It is to his glory to overlook an offense. We will not always like what is being said. And in those moments, it's easy to get defensive, to make excuses, to blame shift, to rationalize and justify the problem away, to change the subject, all of those sorts of things. We kind of focused on this when we talked about criticism. The wise person will listen because they've learned this is actually an opportunity for me to grow. It's an opportunity for me to get better. And so even though I may not like what I'm hearing, it may be very important that I hear it so that I can make the necessary adjustments in my life. And if I just shut them down, I miss that opportunity. Look at 19:11. A man's wisdom gives him patience, and it is his glory to overlook an offense. And I think what Solomon's saying there adds kind of a little different wrinkle. What I am hearing, I may not like it, but it may actually be true, right? May be uncomfortable to hear, but it may be true, in which case a wise individual is going to accept it. They're going to own it. They're going to make the necessary adjustments. It may be a complete misunderstanding, in which case it's the second phrase. It is to his glory to overlook an offense. If we go back to Andy and I having some kind of discussion about something where Andy feels I've done something that's hurt him or offended him in some way, and it may be a complete misunderstanding. And so by being willing to listen, okay, oh, well, Andy, you don't understand. And I get a chance to explain, and all of a sudden that hurt, that offense that was between us, that disappears because it was all a misunderstanding. It may be totally false. I don't think Andy is a vengeful, mean guy, but he just might be trying to hurt me. I don't think Andy would try to hurt me, but it's a possibility. In which case, I know where that's coming from. I know why it's being said, and I can just dismiss it. One last thought. There are times when we will have legitimate differences of opinion, and it would be a boundary issue where what the other person is thinking or feeling, it's perfectly acceptable, it's perfectly legitimate. I just have a difference of opinion. That's okay. And sometimes you need to get comfortable saying, well, I hear what you're saying, I'm going to go in a different direction. Or if it's a more serious matter, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I'm still going in another direction. You're entitled to feel how you want to feel. Guess what? I'm entitled to feel how I want to feel. And I'm going this way, and that's a boundary issue. Does that make sense? A man's wisdom gives him patience, and it is to our glory, if we pluralize it, it is to our glory to be able to work through offenses and move on together. Another skill. This is a little bit different, but it does fall under listening. I'm going to call it respecting one another's privacy. A wicked man listens to evil lips. A liar pays attention to a malicious tongue. Like one who seizes a dog by the ears is a passerby who meddles in a quarrel not his own. And I think it's fair to say that most of us value our own personal privacy. And the last thing we would want is to find out that everyone in the church was talking about whatever it was that we were going through, when in our mind it's none of their business. Right? Can we all agree on that? Okay. Do you value other people's privacy as much as you value your own? And I say, I don't think so. And here's why I say that. Immediately, gossip would disappear, would it not? Because if everyone valued other people's right to privacy as they value your own, here's what I know would be true. There wouldn't be anyone speaking gossip, and there wouldn't be anybody willing to listen to the gossip if somebody wanted to speak it. The reality is, there's a part of us that kind of like gossip, and the juicier, the better. And the answer to that is learn to respect other people's privacy. Now, that's not to say there isn't a time and a place for us as a member of the body of Christ, a member of the family of God, a member of the Prescott community. I used this verse earlier. Being a part of the Prescott family comes with certain responsibilities where we bear one another's burdens. And a spiritual struggle actually is a burden. And if I see someone struggling, if you see someone struggling, Bible tells us how to go about dealing with that, and it's not, oh, let me go to the 1-800 gossip line and share all the dirty laundry of so and so. No, the Bible says go to them alone. I'll do it the old-fashioned way so I don't butcher it. But over in Galatians, Paul talks about this with the Galatians. And in Galatians 6, brothers, if someone is caught in a sin, you who are spiritual should restore him gently, but watch yourself because you're also vulnerable and you may be tempted. Carry one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. So there is a time and a place to get involved in each other's life. But gossip isn't one of them. And so learn to respect other people's privacy. Another one, and we've touched on this in criticism, we touched on it several times already. It's the idea of being receptive and open, not having a closed mind. The wise in heart accept commands. Chattering fool comes to ruin. Don't rebuke a mocker, he'll hate you. But rebuke a wise man, he'll love you. Instruct a wise man, he will become wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he will add to his learning. And the reason is because they realize one of the greatest sources of wisdom that God has given us is in the people that he brought into our lives. Think of, just look around the room, and we're kind of low this morning, but you look around the room. Think of the wealth of experience that's in this room right now. I can think of very few problems that we can encounter in life that someone in this room hasn't dealt with. That's like God's gift to us to help us navigate the complexity of life. But it's only a resource if we're willing to utilize it. And if Glenn or April have wisdom that can really be helpful to me, and my attitude is, I'm not interested. The gift goes unopened and is wasted. So we need to have some receptivity. Let me mention one thing and we'll wrap this up. Listening involves discernment. A simple man believes anything, but a prudent man gives thoughts to his steps. The lips of the righteous know what is fitting, but the mouth of the wicked only what is perverse. Not everything we hear will be true or valid or legitimate. And so we need to be discerning, as I mentioned earlier. We live in a world where there are evil people. Just for instance, just trying to kind of illustrate it because it's so blaringly obvious. When you hear a Republican talk about a Democrat, you probably ought to divide about half of what you hear and subtract half of what you hear, because most Republican politicians make Democrats out to be, non-patriotic, they hate our country, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure there are some like that. But I don't think that's generally true. When you hear a Democrat talk about a Republican, it's almost as if they want to take your children and offer them in a sacrifice to the god Moloch because they're such evil people. And you take what you're hearing, divide it in half, subtract that half, and you're going to be much closer to the truth. Because if I see you as an adversary, I'm probably going to exaggerate anything I say about you. And so we have an adversarial relationship. If you go into the legal system, and I hate to be cynical up here, but I'm going to be cynical up here. If you walk into a courtroom thinking that everyone here is interested in justice and the truth and the American way and apple pie, no. The prosecutor wants to win. The defense attorney wants to win. And that's what they're both trying to do. And truth and justice in the American way doesn't matter. Because I'm trying to win, and I'm trying to win. That's just the reality. And that's where, when you talk about interpersonal relationships, discernment is so very important. Because not everything I'm hearing is going to be true. And so I need to weigh the matter. Figure out, well, there's part of this that's true, and I can act upon that, and it would be wise to act upon it. But some of the stuff isn't adding up. Do you see what I'm saying? Discernment. Because if I take every word as the gospel and respond in that way, based on that assumption, but the assumption was not true, then my response can't be true either. It will be inappropriate, either an under or an overreaction. So discernment is necessary. Let me try to wrap this up. We started with the idea that communication is powerful. When you know how to communicate, man, it's one of the best life skills that you can learn, and it improves and enhances just about anything it touches. It's also complicated, and that's why we often struggle. And for our purposes today, a big part of that struggle is on the listening side. And we live in a culture where we've really been programmed by our culture to assert, to express. We've not really been programmed to listen to the same extent. And so it's just plain easier to listen. There's a reason why James says, let every man be swift to hear and slow to speak. Now, why would he say something like that? Because we're slow to listen and quick to speak. If we were quick to listen and slow to speak, he wouldn't have to say, be swift to hear and slow to speak, right? That's just common sense. And so we need to pay attention. Because a lot of the struggle is tied to listening. And without listening, communication breaks down very, very quickly. But good listening, that's how we get to understanding. That's how we can resolve conflict. That's how we can find agreement. That's a bonding experience. When you think about this objective in marriage, these two people become one flesh. How do you get there? Communication. You're doing life together. That's how you get down here, and listening is 50% of that process. And so I think it would behoove all of us to do something very simple. Learn to listen. Can we pray together? Father, there's a reason why you tell us, be swift to hear and slow to speak. Because we're swift to speak and slow to hear. And the reality is we learn much more with our ears than we do with our mouth. And there's a reason why you give us all these proverbs. You understand how important communication is. You gave us a whole book trying to communicate with us. You've put the Holy Spirit into our hearts, into our lives. He dwells within us. You trying to communicate with us. Where there's communication, there's agreement, there's unity, there's process. We can move together, and we can accomplish so much. And as soon as it starts breaking down, there's problems. And so, Father, I would ask that these words would stay with us. Rome wasn't built in a day, and it's a process. We're not going to go from 1 to 10. We're going to go from 1 to 2, and 2 to 3, and 3 to 4. But I pray that each of us would make a determination in our heart that I want to be a better listener, and that we'd start that journey. With each passing day, week, month, we'd get a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better all the time. I lift that up to you, Father, in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you.